This podcast is brought to you by Empor.top, the stories of top companies. Disclaimer. This AI-generated content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice. Powering through a century of innovation. Picture this, February 1919, Columbus, Indiana. A mechanic with grease under his fingernails sits across from a banker in a three-piece suit. The mechanic, Cummins, is pitching an idea that sounds absurd: building engines that run on diesel, a fuel most Americans associate with dirty German submarines from the Great War. The banker, William Glanton Irwin, sees something others don't. He writes a check that will fund one of American manufacturing's most enduring stories. Today, Cummins Inc. commands a market capitalization of $49.02 billion, with trailing 12-month revenues of $33.87 billion. The company's engines power everything from 18-wheelers thundering down interstate highways to massive mining equipment extracting copper in Chile. They generate electricity for data centers, hospitals, and entire island nations. Yet this industrial giant faces its most existential question: how do you pivot a century-old diesel empire toward electrification without destroying the very business that built it? The Cummins story isn't just about engines, it's about patient capital defeating quarterly capitalism, about engineering excellence as competitive moat, and about a Midwestern company that somehow outmaneuvered giants from Detroit, Tokyo, and Stuttgart. It's a masterclass in managing technology transitions while your core product faces regulatory extinction. We'll trace the journey from that first handshake in Columbus to today's Destination Zero strategy, a bold commitment to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Along the way, we'll unpack how a company built on fossil fuels is betting billions on batteries and hydrogen, why their distribution network might be more valuable than their engineering prowess, and what a $1.675 billion emissions scandal reveals about the perils of regulatory gamesmanship. The structure ahead: we begin with Clessy's showmanship and the Irwin family's extraordinary patience. We'll see how World War II transformed diesel from curiosity to strategic asset. We'll explore the China strategy that turbocharged growth but created dependencies. And we'll examine whether Cummins can pull off one of corporate history's most audacious pivots from diesel dominance to electric leadership without becoming another Kodak cautionary tale.
The diesel engine that would reshape global commerce almost died in an Indiana cornfield. In 1929, 10 years after founding Cummins Engine Company, Clessy Cummins faced catastrophe. His banker, not coincidentally, also his primary investor, William Glanton Irwin, had summoned him for what looked like a liquidation meeting. The company had burned through capital for a decade with little to show beyond prototypes and promises. Clessy did what any desperate entrepreneur would do. He pulled a stunt. Days before the meeting, he secretly installed one of his diesel engines in a used Packard automobile. When Irwin arrived at the bank that morning, Clessy was waiting outside with the car running. "Get in," he said. They drove around Columbus for hours, the engine clattering but never stopping, sipping fuel at a rate that seemed impossible. Irwin, a man who understood numbers better than nuts and bolts, grasped the implications immediately. He extended the credit line. But this wasn't the kind of meticulous German engineer who'd invented the diesel in the 1890s. Clessy had built and operated a steam engine by age 12, but it was his showmanship that distinguished him from other innovators. He'd learned from an old clockmaker how to build tiny steam engines, using brass shotgun shells, with slightly altered pennies forming the pistons, all soldered to a kerosene can that served as the boiler. This was a man who understood that engineering brilliance meant nothing without theater. The partnership between Cummins and Irwin seems improbable on paper. Irwin came from one of Columbus's most prominent banking families, a man of means and social standing. Clessy was a farm boy who'd completed only 8th grade before leaving to work as a mechanic. Yet their collaboration would span nearly 4 decades, surviving losses that would have killed most ventures. Their first commercial applications focused on marine and stationary power, markets where diesel's efficiency mattered more than its weight. But Clessy understood that real growth required automotive applications. The stunts began in earnest. In 1929, after installing the diesel in that Packard, he drove 800 miles to the New York Auto Show on just $1.38 worth of fuel. When officials banned him from the show floor, he hadn't registered. He rented space across the street. The $1.39 for fuel, Indy to NYC sign drew more attention than many official exhibits. Then came the masterstroke, Indianapolis. The #8 Cummins Special qualified with an average speed of 97 miles per hour. 2 days later, with Dave Evans behind the wheel, it became the first entry ever to run the entire race nonstop, finishing 13th on just $1.40 worth of furnace oil. The 1931 race wasn't about winning. It was about proving diesel could survive 500 miles of punishment while delivering unprecedented fuel economy. The following year's attempts pushed harder. Number 5 managed a 12th place finish, the highest ever for a diesel. Yet for all the publicity stunts, Cummins remained unprofitable through the 1920s. The Irwin family poured in capital year after year, an act of faith that would be unthinkable in today's quarterly earnings-obsessed world. William Irwin's patience was legendary and necessary. Between 1919 and 1937, the company lost money in all but 2 years. Most investors would have walked away. The Irwins doubled down. The technical breakthrough came from an unlikely source, railroad switchers. Despite several well-publicized endurance trials, it was not until 1933 that their Model H engine, used in small railroad switchers, proved successful. The Model H bursts open the door to the North American commercial trucking market with an engine that dominates the industry for decades to come. Designed for on-highway transport, the engine would become a fixture on U.S. roads for the next 70 years. What made the Model H special wasn't just reliability. It was the ecosystem Clessy had built around it. He understood that selling diesel engines meant teaching America how to service them. Cummins didn't just ship engines. They sent engineers to customer sites, trained mechanics, and guaranteed parts availability. This service-first mentality would become as important as the engines themselves. By the late 1930s, the company was finally profitable, but it remained a small player in a world about to explode into war. What neither Clessy nor Irwin could have predicted was how global conflict would transform their struggling diesel company into an industrial powerhouse. The patient capital was about to pay off in ways that would reshape American manufacturing.
The morning of December 8, 1941, changed everything for Cummins. As news of Pearl Harbor spread across Indiana, orders from the War Department began flooding the Columbus switchboard. The military needed diesel engines, thousands of them for landing craft, generators, and trucks. The company that had struggled to sell dozens of engines per month was suddenly asked to produce hundreds. Cummins produced mass quantities of engines for the U.S. government for every year of the war. Every engine produced was installed in trucks and sent to both the European and Pacific theaters. The company obtained many military and civil contracts, expanded its facilities, increased its labor force tremendously. During World War II, most of the company's output went to the war effort. Cummins engines endured the harshest conditions, from the tropics to the subarctic. The convoys that supplied the Allied forces in Europe, Africa, and elsewhere were powered in part by Cummins engines. Yet the war years weren't just about production numbers. They fundamentally transformed Cummins's engineering capabilities. The military demanded engines that could survive Arctic cold, desert heat, and Pacific humidity, often within the same month. These extreme requirements forced innovations that would define post-war commercial engines. The company learned to build for worst-case scenarios, a philosophy that would distinguish Cummins engines for decades. With Clessy Cummins leading the internal combustion engine section of the War Production Board and J. Irwin Miller serving in the Navy, the remaining board of directors elect William G. Irwin as chairman. This wartime leadership structure revealed something crucial. Cummins had grown beyond its founders. The company that had depended on Clessy's showmanship and Irwin's checkbook was becoming an institution. The peace dividend came immediately. The Cummins N-Series engines became the industry leader in the post-World War II road-building boom in the United States, with more than half of the heavy-duty truck market using Cummins engines from 1952 to 1959. This wasn't accident or luck. It was the convergence of perfect timing and hard-won capability. Eisenhower's interstate highway system created unprecedented demand for long-haul trucking. Cummins had the engines, the distribution network, and crucially, the reputation for reliability earned in wartime. The company went public in 1947, a transformation that could have diluted the Irwin family's patient capital approach. Instead, J. Irwin Miller, William's great-nephew who became general manager in 1934, managed to maintain the long-term thinking while accessing public markets. Miller was a different breed of executive, a Yale-educated polyglot who spoke multiple languages and served on boards from A-Tant to the Ford Foundation. He understood that Cummins' advantage wasn't just engineering, it was the ability to think in decades while competitors thought in quarters. The culture of innovation manifested in unexpected ways. While the company's claim to be the first manufacturer to use MagnaFlux for non-destructive metal testing may seem like technical trivia, it revealed something deeper. Cummins wasn't just building engines. They were building a system of quality control that would become their signature. Every connecting rod, every crankshaft underwent testing that competitors considered excessive. This obsession with reliability became self-reinforcing. The more reliable the engines, the more customers were willing to pay a premium, the more Cummins could invest in quality. The distribution network built during these years would prove more valuable than any single product innovation. By the late 1950s, Cummins had created something unique in American manufacturing, a network of company-owned and independent distributors who didn't just sell engines but provided parts, service, and most importantly, expertise. A trucker broken down in Montana could get the same quality service as one in Manhattan. This wasn't just customer service, it was a competitive moat that would take competitors decades to replicate. As the 1950s ended, Cummins stood at an inflection point. The company that had survived on patient capital and publicity stunts had become an industrial powerhouse. But success brought new challenges. International competitors were emerging, environmental regulations loomed, and the very diesel technology that had made Cummins would soon face existential questions about pollution and sustainability. The next phase would test whether a company built on internal combustion could reinvent itself for a changing world.
The letter arrived at Columbus headquarters in 1962 from a Scottish distributor. The Europeans think American diesel engines are oversized, overweight, and overhear. It was meant as criticism, but J. Irwin Miller saw opportunity. Rather than retreat, Cummins had already opened an assembly plant in Shotts, Scotland in 1960, not to export American engines, but to build European ones. Miller understood what many American manufacturers missed. Global expansion meant more than shipping products overseas. It meant becoming genuinely multinational. The Holset acquisition in 1973 exemplified Cummins' approach to globalization. Rather than simply buying technology, they acquired an entire ecosystem. Holset Engineering, based in Huddersfield, UK, wasn't just a turbocharger manufacturer, it was a window into European engineering culture and market expectations. The company was purchased by Cummins after briefly being owned by the Hansen Trust, and the integration taught Cummins crucial lessons about preserving innovation culture within acquisitions. Building partnerships with global OEMs became the cornerstone of international expansion. Rather than competing head-to-head with established players in each market, Cummins positioned itself as the engine supplier everyone could trust. They'd build engines for competitors, creating the paradox of cooperation within competition. A Volvo truck might compete against a Freightliner, but both could run Cummins engines. This strategy required walking a tightrope, maintaining confidentiality walls while leveraging economies of scale. The Onan acquisition saga from 1986 to 1992 revealed Cummins' patience in M&A. Rather than hostile takeovers or quick flips, they approached acquisitions like courtships. Cummins began the acquisition of Onan and completed it in 1992. Since then, Onan has evolved into Cummins Power Generation. This 6-year process wasn't inefficiency, it was deliberate integration, preserving what made Onan special while grafting it onto Cummins' global infrastructure. Power generation wasn't just another product line. It represented a fundamental shift in thinking. Engines were no longer just about propulsion. but about providing power wherever needed: data centers, hospitals, remote mining sites. This diversification would prove prescient as the digital revolution created unprecedented demand for reliable backup power. Every Amazon fulfillment center, every Google data center needed generators. Cummins was ready. The Dodge-Ram partnership in 1988 represented something profound: Cummins' entry into consumer consciousness. One of the most popular engines built is the 5.9-liter V6 engine used in the Dodge-Ram heavy-duty pickup starting in 1988. In 2007, a 6.7-liter version of the Cummins straight-six engine became optional on the Ram pickup. This wasn't just another OEM deal, it saved Dodge's truck division from potential extinction and created a brand association so powerful that Cummins became a selling point printed on truck tailgates across America. The timing was perfect. Ford had its Power Stroke, GM had the Duramax, but Dodge had been struggling to compete in the heavy-duty pickup market. The Cummins 5.9-liter turbo diesel, with its 160 horsepower and 400 lb-ft of torque, transformed the Ram from also-ran to segment-leader. More importantly, it brought Cummins technology to hundreds of thousands of individual consumers who became brand evangelists. Visit any truck stop in America and you'll find drivers who can recite their engine's specifications like scripture. The 2001 rebrand from Cummins Engine Company to simply Cummins Inc. signaled the completion of this diversification journey. The company was formerly known as Cummins Engine Company and changed its name to Cummins Inc. in 2001. This wasn't corporate vanity, it was recognition that engines, while still the heart of the business, were now part of a broader ecosystem. Components, filtration, power generation, and distribution had become equally important revenue streams. By the 1990s, Cummins faced a paradox. They'd succeeded so thoroughly in diesel that they risked being typecast as yesterday's technology. Environmental concerns were mounting. California was passing zero-emission mandates. The very product that had built the company was increasingly seen as dirty and outdated. Yet this period also saw some of Cummins' greatest innovations, electronic controls, that made diesels cleaner and more efficient than ever before. The company's response to these challenges revealed its DNA. Rather than denial or retreat, Cummins leaned into the criticism, investing heavily in emissions reduction technology. They supported regulations that competitors fought, betting that their engineering prowess could turn environmental compliance into competitive advantage. This strategy would define the next chapter of the Cummins story, one where the diesel giant would attempt to lead the very transition that threatened its existence.
The meeting in Beijing in 2003 lasted 12 hours. On one side sat Cummins executives, who'd flown in from Columbus. On the other, representatives from Dongfeng Motor Corporation, one of China's automotive giants. The stakes couldn't be higher: access to what would become the world's largest commercial vehicle market. The Americans wanted majority control. The Chinese insisted on 50-50. After midnight, they reached a compromise that would reshape Cummins' future equal ownership, but with technology transfer provisions that gave Cummins effective operational control. This wasn't Cummins' first dance with joint ventures, but China was different. The market's scale defied comprehension. While American truckers debated whether to upgrade from 400 to 450 horsepower, Chinese infrastructure projects needed thousands of engines monthly. The ISG/X12 platform, developed specifically for Asian markets, would eventually surpass 240,000 units per year in China alone. These weren't just sales figures, they represented a fundamental shift in the company's center of gravity. Navigating emissions regulations became a global chess game. While the EPA tightened standards in America, China initially prioritized growth over emissions. Europe had its own trajectory, India another. Cummins had to simultaneously develop engines meeting wildly different standards while maintaining economies of scale. The solution was platform engineering common architectures that could be configured for different markets. An engine block designed in Columbus might be cast in China, fitted with emissions equipment in Germany, and end up powering a truck in Brazil. The 2013 natural gas pivot revealed Cummins' ability to spot market transitions early. Utilizing the joint venture with Westport Innovations formed in 2001, Cummins positioned itself to capture fleet conversions as natural gas prices plummeted. By 2013, fleets were already deploying Kenworth T800S, equipped with the Cummins Westport ISX-12G natural gas engine. The technology wasn't revolutionary. It involved injecting a small amount of diesel fuel before a main, high-pressure, direct injection of natural gas to start combustion, but the timing was perfect. Electronic controls represented the silent revolution in diesel technology. While competitors focused on mechanical improvements, Cummins invested heavily in software and sensors that could optimize combustion in real time. This wasn't just about meeting emission standards, it was about creating engines that could self-diagnose, predict maintenance needs, and adjust performance based on load conditions. A Cummins engine in 2015 contained more computing power than entire fleets had possessed a decade earlier. The global footprint, by 2013 operations in 197 countries, wasn't just about sales presence. It represented a massive data collection network. Every engine failure, every service interval, every customer complaint fed back to Columbus, creating an unparalleled understanding of real-world performance. This information advantage became as valuable as any patent portfolio. Competitors might reverse engineer an engine, but they couldn't replicate decades of field data from millions of units operating in every conceivable condition. The component strategy revealed sophisticated thinking about value chains. Rather than just selling engines, Cummins controlled critical subsystems, turbochargers through Holset, fuel systems, electronic controls. This vertical integration provided multiple benefits: higher margins on complete systems, protection against supplier power, and, most importantly, the ability to optimize across components rather than just at interfaces. When emissions regulations tightened, Cummins could redesign the entire system while competitors negotiated with dozens of suppliers.
In 2018, Cummins acquired Silicon Valley-based Efficient Drivetrains, Inc. EDI, which designs and produces hybrid and fully electric power solutions for commercial markets, marking the latest step forward in Cummins' efforts to become a global electrified power leader. This wasn't a panic buy or trend chasing. Cummins had been developing electrification capabilities for more than a decade, but during the past 9 months had accelerated investment, including acquisitions of UK-based Johnson Matthey Battery Systems and North America-based Bramo. The EDI acquisition revealed careful strategic thinking. EDI's hybrid system was the most versatile on the market, able to switch in real time between fully electric, series, and parallel modes. EDI's portfolio had already traveled more than 6 million miles in fleet settings in the United States and China. This wasn't laboratory technology, it was proven, commercial-ready capability that Cummins could scale immediately. The 2022 Meritor acquisition transformed the electrification strategy from defensive to offensive. The $3.7 billion deal, including assumed debt and net of acquired cash, wasn't just about buying electric drivetrain technology. The integration of Meritor's capabilities in axle and brake technology positioned Cummins as a leading provider of integrated powertrain solutions across internal combustion and electric power applications. E-powertrains would become a critical integration point within hybrid and electric drivetrains, creating packaging and performance differentiation. The financial logic was compelling. Annual pre-tax run rate synergies of approximately $130 million by year 3 after closing. But the strategic rationale went deeper. In electric vehicles, the powertrain architecture fundamentally changes. The engine compartment disappears. Power can be delivered directly to wheels through electric axles. Cummins needed to own these integration points or risk being commoditized as a component supplier. Through Meritor came another strategic asset, Siemens Commercial Vehicles, acquired for €190 million. This wasn't just adding more electric technology, it was acquiring European engineering talent and market access at a time when EU regulations were driving faster electrification than North America. The ability to develop solutions in Europe's regulatory environment and then adapt them for other markets provided a critical learning advantage. The 2023 rebrand of New Power to Accelera by Cummins signaled more than marketing. It represented organizational recognition that electrification couldn't be a side project or future bet. It needed its own identity, resources, and leadership. Creating a distinct brand allowed Cummins to pursue electric opportunities without confusing customers who still needed diesel solutions. It also enabled talent acquisition from Silicon Valley and other tech hubs where the Cummins brand might have seemed antiquated. The Jacobs Vehicle Systems acquisition brought unexpected synergies. Engine braking and cylinder deactivation technologies might seem irrelevant to electrification, but they represented crucial bridge technologies. As fleets transition gradually to electric, hybrid systems need sophisticated control of internal combustion components. The ability to seamlessly deactivate cylinders or provide regenerative braking-like functionality in conventional drivetrains extends the relevance of hybrid solutions. The 2025 First Mode acquisition revealed evolving thinking about market entry. Rather than competing for new electric vehicle platforms, Cummins targeted retrofit markets, mining equipment, and rail applications where equipment life spans decades. First Mode's hydrogen and battery powertrain IP enabled Cummins to electrify existing fleets rather than waiting for replacement cycles. This strategy acknowledged a crucial reality. The installed base of diesel equipment is too valuable to scrap, but too polluting to ignore. Destination Zero. The commitment to net zero emissions by 2050 might seem like corporate virtue signaling, but for Cummins it represents existential strategy. Unlike software companies that can pivot overnight, Cummins develops products with 20-year life cycles for customers who keep equipment even longer. Signaling this transition early allows customers to plan their own transformations. It also attracts talent and capital that might otherwise flow to pure-play electric companies. Most importantly, it forces internal decision-making to consider long-term viability over short-term optimization.
The 2023 Chevron Partnership for Hydrogen, Natural Gas, and Lower Carbon Fuel Value Chains revealed sophisticated thinking about energy transitions. Rather than betting everything on batteries, Cummins recognized that different applications would require different solutions. Long-haul trucking might need hydrogen. Urban delivery could go battery electric. Remote power generation might use renewable natural gas. Partnering with an energy major provided infrastructure expertise that Cummins lacked while giving Chevron hardware capabilities for their own transition. The OEM relationship strategy defied conventional wisdom. Most suppliers would kill for exclusive deals, but Cummins deliberately served competitors. They'd provide engines to Freightliner, Volvo, PACCAR, and International simultaneously. This apparent conflict created unexpected advantages. First, it maximized economies of scale in development and production. Second, it prevented any single OEM from gaining leverage. Third, and most subtly, it made Cummins indispensable to the entire industry. OEMs might compete fiercely, but they all depended on Cummins. Joint ventures in emerging markets followed a consistent pattern. Cummins provided technology and brand, local partners provided market access, and government relationships. But unlike many Western companies that got burned in these arrangements, Cummins succeeded by accepting genuine partnership. They didn't just license old technology, they developed products specifically for local markets. The ISG platform for China wasn't a detuned American engine. It was designed from scratch for Chinese duty cycles, fuel quality, and cost targets. Technology partnerships for alternative fuels revealed portfolio thinking. Rather than picking winners, Cummins partnered broadly Westport for natural gas, Hydrogenics for fuel cells, multiple battery suppliers for electrification. This hedging strategy cost more upfront but provided invaluable optionality. When natural gas prices spiked, they had diesel. When emissions regulations tightened, they had electric. When hydrogen infrastructure develops, they'll be ready. The distribution model partnership structure mixing company-owned and independent distributors created aligned incentives. Company-owned locations in major markets provided direct customer feedback and set service standards. Independent distributors in secondary markets provided local relationships and entrepreneurial energy. The key innovation was treating independents as genuine partners, not just customers. They received the same training, same tools, same access to engineering support as company locations. Balancing cooperation and competition required sophisticated organizational design. Engineers working on Volvo programs couldn't access Freightliner data, yet they all used common platforms and components. This required both technical systems, separate servers, access controls, and cultural systems ethics training, clear communication about boundaries. The legal complexity was staggering. but the business benefits justified the investment.
The 2023 emissions scandal shattered Cummins's carefully cultivated reputation for integrity. The $1.675 billion fine for Clean Air Act violations, covering 960,000 engines produced between 2013 and 2023 with bypass devices, represented the second-largest Clean Air Act penalty ever. The additional $325 million in remedies and recalls brought total costs above $2 billion. But the financial impact paled compared to the reputational damage. The defeat devices were sophisticated software that detected when engines were being tested and adjusted performance to pass emission standards, then reverted to different settings in real-world operation. This wasn't a rogue engineer or isolated incident. The scope suggested systematic decisions at multiple levels over a decade. The very engineering excellence that had built Cummins's reputation had been weaponized against regulations the company publicly supported. Leadership response revealed both damage control and genuine reform. Jennifer Rumsey, who became CEO in 2022, faced the crisis in her first full year. Rather than deflecting blame to predecessors, she acknowledged systemic failures and implemented sweeping changes. The company hired independent monitors, restructured reporting relationships between engineering and compliance, and instituted new whistleblower protections. The speed and comprehensiveness suggested preparation, perhaps internal discovery had revealed the violations before regulators found them. The regulatory relationship rebuilding went beyond compliance. Cummins proactively proposed stricter testing protocols, funded independent emissions research, and opened their facilities to regulatory inspection. This transparency came at a cost. Competitors gained insights into Cummins's technology, but the alternative was regulatory paralysis. Every new product would face scrutiny. Every certification would take longer. The only path forward was radical openness. The scandal's impact on strategy was counterintuitive. Rather than retreating from emissions commitments, Cummins doubled down on Destination Zero. The logic was clear. The best defense against future violations was to eliminate the pollutants entirely. Electric engines can't have defeat devices for emissions they don't produce. The scandal accelerated the electrification timeline, turning a gradual transition into an urgent imperative. Cultural changes went beyond compliance training. The company instituted Speak Up campaigns, encouraging employees to report concerns. They restructured incentive systems to reward emissions, reductions equally with performance improvements. Most significantly, they began publishing detailed emissions data from customer engines in operation, not just certification tests. This radical transparency made future cheating nearly impossible. Thousands of customers were effectively monitoring compliance. The governance improvements addressed root causes. Board oversight of regulatory compliance increased. The audit committee gained direct access to engineering data. External directors with regulatory expertise were recruited. Executive compensation was tied to compliance metrics, not just financial performance. These changes acknowledged an uncomfortable truth. The pressure to meet both emissions standards and customer performance expectations had created impossible tensions that leadership had resolved through deception. Lessons learned extended beyond Cummins. The scandal revealed industry-wide challenges in meeting increasingly strict emission standards while maintaining performance and reliability. The technology existed to meet standards, but at costs customers resisted paying. The defeat devices were wrong legally and ethically, but they emerged from real market pressures. Cummins's recovery required not just internal reform, but education of customers about the true costs of clean technology.
The 5-segment structure engine, distribution, components, power systems, and Accelera reveals portfolio sophistication. Each segment serves different customers, faces different competitors, and operates on different cycles. Engines might struggle when truck sales decline, but components could thrive selling replacement parts. Power systems provide stability through long-term service contracts. This diversification isn't accidental, it's designed to smooth cyclical volatility inherent in industrial markets. Revenue evolution tells a story of disciplined growth. The $34.10 billion in 2024 revenue represents consistent expansion through economic cycles, regulatory changes, and technology transitions. But raw growth understates the achievement. Cummins maintained pricing power while competitors faced commoditization. They expanded margins while investing heavily in new technology. They gained market share while serving competing OEMs. This isn't just growth, it's profitable, sustainable, strategic growth. Operating metrics reveal operational excellence despite headwinds. The 25.58% gross margin in a manufacturing business with massive fixed costs and volatile input prices demonstrates pricing power and efficiency. The 11.75% operating margin might seem modest compared to software companies, but for industrial manufacturing, it's exceptional. The 8.20% profit margin after interest, taxes, and the emissions settlement shows resilience. These aren't peak numbers, they're sustained through cycles. Financial returns justify the premium valuation. The 26.19% return on equity demonstrates efficient capital deployment. The 13.23% return on invested capital, despite heavy acquisition spending and R&D investment, exceeds cost of capital by a healthy margin. These returns aren't financial engineering. Cummins maintains conservative leverage and returns cash to shareholders rather than pursuing buybacks at any price. Capital allocation balances all stakeholders. The $8 annual dividend, yielding 2.18%, provides income while retaining capital for growth. The company avoided the trap of many industrials cutting dividends in downturns or leveraging up in booms. This consistency attracts long-term shareholders who provide patient capital for multi-year development programs. The dividend policy signals confidence without constraining flexibility. The distribution network represents hidden value. With 600-plus company-owned and independent distributors and 7,200 dealers, Cummins has built infrastructure that would cost tens of billions to replicate. This isn't just real estate, it's relationships, trained technicians, parts inventory, and local market knowledge. The network generates recurring revenue through parts and service that smooths new equipment cycles. More importantly, it creates switching costs that lock in customers. The recurring revenue model transforms the business. Parts and service generate higher margins than new equipment and provide visibility into future cash flows. A truck engine sold today will need parts for 20 years. A generator installed in a data center requires quarterly maintenance. This installed base of millions of engines creates an annuity stream that funds R&D and provides resilience in downturns. Competitors might match product specifications, but can't replicate decades of installed base. R&D investment strategy balances current and future. Spending billions on electrification while diesel generates cash requires discipline. The temptation to milk the diesel business while minimizing investment is strong and ultimately fatal. Cummins invests in improving diesel efficiency, meeting emission standards, and reducing costs while simultaneously funding electric development. This dual-track approach is expensive but necessary. The company that wins the transition will be one that can fund it from current operations.
Patient capital enabled Cummins to survive unprofitable decades and emerge dominant. The Irwin family's willingness to fund losses from 1919 to 1937 seems impossible in today's quarterly capitalism. Yet this patience created lasting advantage. Cummins could invest in quality when competitors cut corners. They could develop technology when others licensed it. They could build distribution when others relied on third parties. The lesson isn't just about having patient capital. It's about deserving it through long-term thinking. Engineering excellence as competitive advantage requires more than good products. It demands a culture that values precision, a willingness to overinvest in quality, and the discipline to say no to shortcuts. Cummins' use of Magna flux testing when competitors considered it excessive created reputation that justified premium pricing. The lesson: operational excellence compounds. Small quality advantages accumulate into insurmountable moats. Distribution and service networks provide more sustainable advantage than technology. Patents expire, products get copied, but local relationships and service capabilities are nearly impossible to replicate quickly. Cummins' investment in distribution, when competitors focused solely on manufacturing, created switching costs and customer loyalty that transcended product cycles. The playbook: control the customer relationship, not just the product. Managing technology transitions requires deliberate cannibalization. Cummins' investment in electric technology that threatens diesel revenue seems self-destructive. But waiting for disruption is fatal. By leading the transition, Cummins can influence timing, capture early share, and transfer customer relationships. The strategy? Disrupt yourself before others do it for you. Strategic M&A should buy capabilities, not just revenue. The EDI acquisition brought electric expertise. Meritor provided integration points. Jacobs added complementary technology. Each deal filled specific capability gaps rather than just adding scale. The discipline to walk away from deals that don't provide strategic value even when capital is available distinguishes successful acquirers. Global-local balance through joint ventures requires cultural adaptation. Cummins succeeded in China not by imposing American methods, but by genuinely partnering with local companies. They accepted 50-50 ownership when they wanted control. They developed products for local markets rather than pushing global platforms. The wisdom. Market access requires more than capital, it requires humility and adaptation. Regulatory navigation demands proactive engagement. Despite the emissions scandal, Cummins' historical approach of supporting regulations that competitors fought created credibility and influence. They shaped standards rather than just meeting them. The insight: regulations are competitive tools. Companies that influence them gain advantage over those that merely comply. Platform thinking beats product thinking in complex industries. Cummins doesn't just sell engines, they provide power solutions. This systems approach creates multiple touchpoints with customers, increases switching costs, and enables premium pricing. The framework: define the platform broadly enough to capture value but narrowly enough to maintain focus.
The bull case rests on fundamental strengths that transcend technology transitions. Revenue growing 12.6% annually demonstrates organic expansion beyond inflation or acquisition. The 24.1% return on equity exceeds most industrial peers and many technology companies. Leadership positions across multiple segments: diesel engines, power generation, components, provide diversification and pricing power. The successful electrification pivot, evidenced by Accelera's growth and strategic acquisitions, positions Cummins to win regardless of powertrain technology. The distribution moat grows stronger with scale. Every additional service location increases network value for customers. Every technician trained expands capability. Every part stocked reduces customer downtime. This network effect in physical infrastructure is rare and powerful. Digital competitors might disrupt information businesses, but they can't email a replacement engine to a stranded truck. The bear case acknowledges existential threats. Diesel's decline isn't hypothetical, it's happening. California bans new diesel truck sales by 2035. European cities restrict diesel vehicle access today. While Cummins invests in electrification, pure-play electric companies move faster without legacy infrastructure. The innovator's dilemma is real. Cummins must manage decline in their core business while funding its replacement. Regulatory pressures intensify beyond emissions. Safety requirements, cybersecurity mandates, and supply chain regulations add cost and complexity. The emissions scandal destroyed regulatory goodwill that took decades to build. Every new standard faces scrutiny about compliance. The burden of proof has shifted. Cummins must demonstrate innocence rather than assume trust. China dependency creates vulnerability. The massive volumes from Chinese joint ventures are critical for economies of scale. But geopolitical tensions threaten access. Technology transfer requirements mean Cummins trains future competitors. Local champions receive government support that foreign partners can't match. Success in China created dependencies that could become liabilities. Technology transition execution risk multiplies with complexity. Electrification isn't just replacing engines with motors, it's reimagining entire systems. Battery management, thermal dynamics, and power electronics require different expertise than mechanical engineering. Software becomes as important as hardware. Cummins must transform its workforce, supply chain, and culture while maintaining current operations. Competitive positioning versus established players reveals nuanced dynamics. Caterpillar's mining and construction focus provides different exposure than Cummins' on-highway emphasis. PACCAR's vertical integration into truck manufacturing creates different economics. Volvo's European base provides regulatory learning advantages. Each competitor has strengths, but none match Cummins's breadth across technologies, markets, and applications. Valuation at 17.70. Trailing PE and 17.45 forward PE seems reasonable for an industrial company, but expensive for one facing disruption. The market prices in successful transition without major setbacks. Any execution stumbles, regulatory penalties, or technology surprises could trigger multiple compression. Yet compared to pure-play electric companies trading at revenue multiples, Cummins offers value. The question isn't absolute valuation, but relative opportunity versus risk.
The energy transition challenge facing Cummins transcends normal business strategy. How do you maintain diesel profitability to fund electrification that destroys diesel demand? How do you retain combustion engineers while recruiting battery experts? How do you serve customers through transition when they themselves don't know their future needs? These paradoxes don't have clean solutions, only manage tensions. Geographic expansion opportunities exist but require careful selection. India's infrastructure boom demands power solutions. Africa's leapfrogging potential favors new technology over legacy infrastructure. Southeast Asia's manufacturing growth creates component demand. But each market has unique challenges, regulatory complexity, payment risk, competitive dynamics. Expansion must be strategic, not opportunistic. Technology bets must balance diversification with focus. Hydrogen offers promise for long-haul applications but requires infrastructure investment. Batteries work for urban delivery but face weight and charging constraints. Hybrid solutions provide transition bridges but add complexity. The temptation to bet everything on one technology is strong and dangerous. Portfolio approaches cost more but provide essential optionality. Culture and talent transformation may be the biggest challenge. Mechanical engineers who spent careers perfecting combustion must embrace electrification. Manufacturing workers must adapt to different products and processes. Sales teams must learn new value propositions. This isn't just training, it's identity transformation. Companies are collections of people, and people resist change that threatens their relevance. If we were CEOs, we'd accelerate the split between legacy and growth businesses. Not a full separation. The synergies remain valuable but clearer organizational boundaries. Let diesel generate cash with operational excellence focus. Let Accelera pursue growth with innovation emphasis. Different metrics, different incentives, different cultures. The challenge is maintaining collaboration while enabling differentiation. We'd also radically increase transparency about the transition. Publish monthly data on electric versus diesel sales. Share technology roadmaps with customers. Admit uncertainties rather than projecting false confidence. The companies that win disruptions are those that bring customers along rather than surprising them. Trust becomes the ultimate competitive advantage during uncertainty. The biggest surprise from researching Cummins is the richness of industrial innovation. Software gets attention, but physical products that survive millions of miles over decades represent extraordinary engineering achievement. The complexity of modern diesel engines managing thousands of variables in microseconds while meeting conflicting demands for power, efficiency, and emissions rivals any algorithm. Another surprise, the importance of patient capital in technology transitions. The Irwin family's multi-generational support enabled long-term thinking that public markets discourage. Even today, successful transformation requires investors who measure returns in decades, not quarters. The financialization of American business makes Cummins-style patience increasingly rare and valuable. Final reflection. Cummins represents American manufacturing at its best and worst. The innovation, quality, and scale demonstrate industrial capability. The global reach and technological leadership show competitive strength. But the emissions scandal reveals ethical failures when pressure meets opportunity. The dependence on China exposes strategic vulnerabilities. The challenge of transformation highlights organizational inertia. The next century won't resemble the last. Cummins won't celebrate its 200th anniversary as a diesel company if it celebrates at all. But the capabilities that built the company, engineering excellence, customer focus, strategic patience, remain relevant regardless of technology. The question isn't whether Cummins survives, but what it becomes. The answer depends on decisions being made today in Columbus, decisions that will determine whether Cummins leads the energy transition or becomes its casualty.
This podcast is brought to you by Emport.top, the stories of top companies. Disclaimer. This AI-generated content is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice.